Stop. Don't let her sign that. The words echoed through the hospital hallway just seconds before Ethan Whitmore pushed open the door to his mother's private room and saw something that made his entire world stop. For a moment, nobody moved. Not the nurse standing by the window. Not the elegant blonde woman beside the bed. Not even Eleanor Whitmore herself. Ethan's 72-year-old mother sat propped against a pillow, her trembling hand resting on a stack of documents. And slowly, silently, a tear rolled down her cheek. Ethan felt his stomach drop. He had driven 90 miles through evening traffic after receiving an urgent call from the hospital. The message had been vague. His mother's condition had changed. The doctors wanted family present. During the entire drive, he prepared himself for the worst. He feared losing the woman who had raised him alone after his father died. The woman who had worked 2 jobs so he could attend college. The woman who believed in him long before he became one of the most successful healthcare executives in the country. But this was not what he expected to find. Standing beside Eleanor's bed was Vanessa Clark, Ethan's fiancée. Beautiful, polished, calm. She turned toward him with a smile that seemed almost rehearsed. "Ethan," she said softly, "you're here." Yet something felt wrong. Very wrong. Ethan looked at the papers, then at his mother, then back at Vanessa. "What's going on?" he asked. Nobody answered immediately. The silence stretched across the room like a heavy blanket. Then Ethan noticed someone standing near the doorway. Naomi Brooks, the family's caregiver. Her eyes were fixed on Eleanor. Her expression carried a mixture of concern and fear. Naomi looked like someone who wanted to speak, but didn't know whether she should. Ethan had hired her 6 months earlier to help care for both his mother and his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Quiet and compassionate, Naomi rarely inserted herself into family matters. But tonight, something about her seemed different. Almost alarmed. "Mom." Ethan stepped closer. "Are you okay?" Eleanor forced a weak smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart." But her voice cracked. Ethan knew his mother too well. She wasn't fine. Across the room, Vanessa calmly gathered the documents and placed them inside a leather folder. "It's nothing important," she explained. "Just paperwork." Something inside Ethan tightened. His entire career had been built on recognizing details others missed. Yet lately, there were details inside his own family he seemed unable to see. While Ethan stood beside his mother's bed, another image flashed through his mind. Lily. His daughter had been acting strangely for weeks. Sleepless nights. Quiet tears. Strange drawings scattered across her bedroom floor. Drawings of hospitals. Drawings of doors. Drawings of a woman with long blonde hair standing beside a bed. Ethan had dismissed them as childhood fears. Naomi had not. Just 2 nights earlier, she had gently suggested that Lily might be trying to tell them something. Ethan brushed the idea aside. Children imagined things. That was what children did. But now, standing inside that hospital room, he wasn't so sure anymore. Then Eleanor suddenly reached for Ethan's hand and squeezed it tighter than she had in months. Her eyes filled with tears. Her lips trembled. And before anyone could stop her, she whispered 5 words that drained every bit of color from Ethan's face. "She cannot be trusted, Ethan." The room went silent. Vanessa froze. Naomi lowered her eyes. And Ethan realized that the woman he loved and the woman who had raised him might be hiding a secret far bigger than he ever imagined. But if his mother was telling the truth, what exactly had Vanessa been trying so desperately to make her sign? The words stayed with Ethan long after he left the hospital room. "She cannot be trusted, Ethan." His mother had barely enough strength to sit upright. Yet those 5 words carried more weight than any boardroom warning he had ever received. That night, he drove home through the quiet Connecticut roads with his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. The mansion waited at the end of a long, tree-lined driveway, its lights glowing against the darkness. From the outside, it looked perfect. Inside, it felt different. For the first time in years, Ethan could not shake the feeling that something inside his own family was slipping beyond his control. Eleanor Whitmore had always been the strongest person he knew. After his father died from a heart attack when Ethan was only 14, she became everything at once. Mother, father, teacher, protector. She worked endless hours, sacrificed vacations, sold jewelry she loved, and somehow kept food on the table while encouraging Ethan to dream bigger than their circumstances. Every success Ethan achieved carried her fingerprints. Every building his company owned felt connected to her sacrifices. Losing her had always been his greatest fear. That fear only deepened after his wife, Rachel, passed away unexpectedly 8 years earlier. Since then, Ethan devoted himself to work and to raising Lily. But grief had a way of hiding inside people. Some buried it beneath success. Others buried it inside silence. By the time he arrived home, Naomi was sitting with Lily in the library. The little girl was curled beneath a blanket, hugging the pink stuffed bear she carried everywhere. She looked exhausted. Ethan kissed her forehead and noticed another drawing resting beside her. Hospitals again. Doors again. But this time there was something new. A small silver key sketched near the corner of the page. Ethan frowned. What is this? Lily quickly pulled the paper away. Nothing. Then she looked down. Naomi watched quietly. She had seen dozens of these drawings over the past month. Most adults would dismiss them. Naomi could not. Children often spoke through symbols when they did not know how to explain what frightened them. After Lily went upstairs, Naomi finally gathered enough courage to speak. Mr. Whitmore, there is something else you should know. Ethan turned toward her. What is it? Naomi hesitated. Your mother has been asking for an old Bible every time I visit her. Ethan looked surprised. Eleanor had not attended church regularly in years. That is strange. Naomi nodded slowly. What is stranger is that every time Vanessa visits, the Bible disappears afterward. Ethan immediately shook his head. There has to be an explanation. Yet the certainty in his voice felt weaker than before. Later that night, unable to sleep, Ethan opened an old photo album he had not touched in years. There were pictures of Eleanor holding Lily as a baby. Pictures of Rachel smiling beside the Christmas tree. Pictures of family dinners before grief reshaped everything. As he turned another page, a folded note slipped from between the photographs and landed on the floor. He picked it up absent-mindedly. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges. It was addressed in Rachel's handwriting. To Eleanor. Ethan's heartbeat slowed. He had never seen the letter before. He stared at it for several seconds before carefully unfolding it. But before he could read a single line, his phone rang. The caller was Dr. Michael Carter from the hospital. His voice sounded tense. Mr. Whitmore, I think you need to come here immediately. Something happened tonight, and it concerns your mother's medical records. The drive back to the hospital felt longer than the 90 miles Ethan had traveled earlier that evening. Dr. Carter had refused to explain anything over the phone. He only repeated the same sentence twice. Something is wrong with your mother's records. By the time Ethan arrived, the hospital corridors were nearly empty. The night shift had settled in. The bright energy of the day had been replaced by silence. Dr. Carter was waiting outside his office, holding a thick folder under his arm. His expression immediately told Ethan this was not a misunderstanding. After closing the door, the doctor placed several documents on his desk. I started reviewing your mother's chart after our conversation earlier, he explained. At first I thought it was a clerical error. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. What kind of error? Dr. Carter slid a page forward. Medication adjustments. Ethan stared at the forms. Most of the information meant little to him. But one detail stood out. Multiple changes had been authorized during the past 6 weeks. Changes Eleanor never discussed with him. Who approved these? Ethan asked. Dr. Carter hesitated. That is the problem. The signatures appear valid. But your mother claims she never signed several of them. Ethan felt a chill run through him. His mother had always managed her own affairs carefully. She read every document twice. She questioned everything. She never signed anything without understanding it completely. There is more, Dr. Carter said quietly. He opened another section of the file. Several visitor logs appeared on the screen. Ethan recognized many names. Nurses, specialists, family members. Then one name appeared repeatedly. Vanessa Clark. Day after day. Sometimes twice in the same day. Sometimes during hours when Ethan believed she was elsewhere. She visited far more often than you did, Dr. Carter said gently. The observation was not intended as criticism, yet it still landed painfully. Ethan looked away. Over the years he had convinced himself that providing financially was enough. The company demanded his time. Investors demanded his attention. Emergencies filled every calendar. Somewhere along the way, he stopped noticing how often other people occupied spaces that should have belonged to him. Before Ethan could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. Naomi stepped into the office. She had brought Lily with her. The little girl looked exhausted, still wearing pajamas beneath her coat. "I am sorry to interrupt," Naomi said. But something happened. Lily clutched a small sketchbook against her chest. She looked nervous. Ethan immediately softened. "Sweetheart, what is wrong?" For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she slowly opened the sketchbook and handed it to him. Ethan expected another drawing of hospital rooms and doors. Instead, he found page after page filled with the same image. A silver key, drawn over and over, sometimes beside a Bible, sometimes beside a hospital bed, sometimes inside a small wooden box. Dr. Carter exchanged a glance with Naomi. "Lily," Ethan asked gently, "why do you keep drawing this key?" The little girl lowered her eyes. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Because Grandma told me not to forget it." Ethan froze. Naomi leaned forward. "When did she tell you that?" Lily swallowed hard. "A long time ago." Then she looked toward the hospital window, as though remembering something she wished she could forget. The day she saw Vanessa in her room. The office became completely silent. Ethan's heart pounded. This was the first time Lily had ever connected Vanessa to any of her drawings. The first time she had attached a real memory to the symbols she had been carrying for weeks. Naomi gently squeezed the child's shoulder. "Lily, did your grandmother tell you where the key is?" Lily nodded. Then she said something that none of them expected. "It is hidden inside the church Bible. But somebody already tried to find it." Ethan stared at her. Dr. Carter stared at her. Naomi slowly covered her mouth. Because for the first time, they were no longer dealing with random drawings or childhood fears. They had a clue. A real clue. And somewhere inside that old Bible Eleanor kept asking for, there might be something important enough for someone to secretly search for it before anyone else discovered the truth. The conversation in Dr. Carter's office ended long after midnight, but nobody left with answers. They only left carrying more questions than before. Ethan drove Naomi and Lily home through the darkness, and for most of the ride, nobody spoke. Lily sat quietly in the back seat hugging her stuffed bear while Naomi watched the child through the rearview mirror. Something had changed that night. For weeks, Lily had hidden inside silence. She spoke only when necessary. She avoided conversations about the hospital. She avoided conversations about her grandmother. Yet now she had finally revealed something she had been carrying alone. The weight of that realization stayed with Naomi long after they returned to the mansion. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Naomi found Lily sitting beside the large window in her bedroom. Moonlight spilled across the floor. The child looked much smaller than her 8 years. "You should be sleeping," Naomi said gently. Lily shook her head. "I keep having the dream again." Naomi sat beside her. "The same dream?" Lily nodded. For several moments, she stared out at the trees swaying beyond the glass. Then she whispered, "Grandma is always trying to tell me something, but I cannot hear her." Naomi felt her heart tighten. Children often carried grief differently than adults. They did not always have the words to explain fear, loss, or confusion. Sometimes those emotions appeared as drawings. Sometimes they appeared as dreams. "What happens in the dream?" Naomi asked softly. Lily hesitated. Then she leaned her head against Naomi's shoulder. It was the first time she had initiated physical comfort in months. "She looks scared," Lily said. "And every time she tries to tell me something, someone closes the door." Naomi wrapped an arm around her. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence felt different now. Not empty. Not lonely. Just shared. Eventually Lily reached inside her sketchbook and removed a folded piece of paper. Naomi expected another drawing. Instead, she found a carefully written note in a child's handwriting. Several short sentences. Words that had clearly taken courage to write. "I think Daddy is sad all the time. I think Grandma is scared all the time. I think nobody listens anymore." Naomi blinked back tears. Children noticed far more than adults realized, especially children who had already experienced loss. "Why did you write this?" she asked. Lily looked down. "Because Mommy used to say people stop hearing each other before families fall apart." Naomi froze. Rachel, Ethan's late wife. Nobody had spoken those exact words in years. Yet somehow Lily still remembered them. The next morning brought another surprise. While helping Eleanor organize a few personal belongings at the hospital, Naomi discovered something hidden inside a small memory box. It was not a key. It was not a document. It was an old photograph. The edges were worn from age. In the picture, Eleanor stood outside a small church beside Rachel. Both women were smiling. On the back, written in Eleanor's handwriting, was a date from nearly 9 years earlier and a single sentence. For the promise we made to protect her. Naomi stared at the words. Protect her. But who was her? Lily? Someone else? Before Naomi could examine the photograph further, she noticed something tucked behind it. A second item. Smaller. Thinner. A receipt from a safe deposit box rented at a local bank. The rental was still active. Naomi felt a chill run through her. Whatever Eleanor had been protecting all these years had not been kept in the mansion. It had not been kept in the hospital. It had been locked away somewhere else entirely. And if the safe deposit box contained the secret Eleanor was so desperate to protect, why had she never told Ethan about it before now? For the first time in months, Ethan saw something he thought his family had lost forever. Hope. It appeared quietly on a Saturday morning while sunlight filled the breakfast room. There were no dramatic speeches, no life-changing announcements, just a small moment that almost nobody would have noticed. Lily laughed. The sound lasted only a few seconds, but it stopped Ethan in his tracks. He had been pouring coffee when he heard it. A real laugh. Not forced. Not polite. The kind that came from somewhere deep inside a child who had briefly forgotten her fear. Naomi was sitting beside her at the table, helping her sort through colored pencils. Neither woman seemed to realize Ethan had frozen in the doorway. For a moment, he simply listened. It felt like hearing music in a house that had been silent for years. Something inside him softened. Later that afternoon, Ethan joined Naomi at the hospital. He had spent the previous night thinking about the safe deposit box and the mysterious promise connected to Rachel and Eleanor. The questions would not leave him alone. Yet another question troubled him even more. Why had his mother trusted Naomi with so much while keeping him in the dark? The answer became clearer when he entered Eleanor's room. His mother looked tired but calmer than she had in weeks. The fear that once seemed permanently etched across her face had eased slightly. As Naomi adjusted her blanket and brought her a cup of tea, Eleanor reached out and squeezed the caregiver's hand. It was a simple gesture, yet Ethan immediately recognized the trust behind it. Naomi was not merely helping his family. She had become part of it. While Eleanor rested, Ethan finally gathered the courage to ask a question that had been bothering him for years. Why did Rachel spend so much time with my mother before she died? Naomi looked surprised. You never asked? Ethan shook his head slowly. Work had consumed him during those years. Meetings, flights, deadlines. He suddenly realized how many conversations he had missed. Naomi hesitated before answering. Because they were worried about Lily. Ethan frowned. Worried about what? Naomi looked toward Eleanor, who was sleeping peacefully. I do not think they were worried about her health. I think they were worried about something happening to her if they were gone. The words settled heavily between them. Before Ethan could respond, Eleanor stirred awake. Her eyes focused on him. Then she whispered something unexpected. The box. Ethan immediately leaned forward. What box? Eleanor's breathing grew shallow. Rachel wanted you to find it when the time was right. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. What is inside? Eleanor slowly shook her head. Not what you think. Before he could ask another question, a nurse entered carrying fresh test results. Dr. Carter reviewed them moments later and delivered the first genuinely positive news the family had received in months. Eleanor's condition had stabilized. The decline everyone feared had finally slowed. Even he could not fully explain why. The room seemed lighter after that. Lily arrived later with another drawing. But this one was different from all the others. There were no hospital beds, no closed doors, no frightened faces. Instead, she had drawn a small family standing beneath a bright sky. Ethan studied the picture carefully. 4 figures stood together. Himself, Lily, Eleanor, Naomi. His smile faded slightly. There was someone missing. Vanessa. Before Ethan could process that detail, Harold entered carrying a sealed envelope that had just arrived from the bank. It concerned the safe deposit box. The account was active exactly as the receipt suggested. But one sentence in the letter immediately drained the optimism from the room. Access had been requested 3 days earlier by an unidentified individual. Someone else had already discovered the existence of the box. And if they were searching for whatever Rachel and Eleanor had hidden inside, how much time did Ethan have left before the truth disappeared forever? The letter from the bank changed everything. Until that moment, Ethan had been reacting to clues as they appeared. Now, for the first time, he realized someone else was moving through the same trail of secrets. Someone had requested access to the safe deposit box before he even knew it existed. That realization followed him home like a shadow. The next morning, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He postponed a major board meeting for the first time in nearly a decade. Investors could wait. Reporters could wait. Contracts could wait. His family could not. Ethan instructed Harold to arrange an appointment at the bank as soon as possible. Then he drove directly to the hospital to update Naomi and his mother. But when he arrived, another problem was already waiting. Vanessa was there. She stood beside Eleanor's bed with her usual calm smile. Yet something about the atmosphere felt different. The warmth that once existed between her and Ethan had begun to disappear. Tiny cracks were forming. Questions Ethan could no longer ignore. Vanessa immediately noticed his distance. "You have barely answered my calls," she said. Ethan avoided her eyes. "There has been a lot happening." Her expression tightened. "Or maybe someone has been filling your head with stories." The comment seemed harmless on the surface, but both of them knew exactly who she meant. Naomi. For the first time, Ethan felt anger rising inside him. Naomi had done nothing except care for the people he loved. Yet Vanessa's tone carried unmistakable suspicion. Before the conversation could continue, Eleanor suddenly asked for Naomi. Not Ethan. Not Vanessa. Naomi. The request landed heavily in the room. Vanessa's smile disappeared for just a second before returning. It was a small moment, but Ethan noticed it. Later that afternoon, another unexpected challenge emerged. Lily refused to attend her weekly art therapy session. She had always been reluctant, but this time was different. She became anxious the moment the appointment was mentioned. Naomi gently sat beside her in the garden behind the mansion. Autumn leaves drifted across the grass while the child stared silently at the fountain. "You do not have to tell me if you are not ready," Naomi said softly. Several minutes passed before Lily finally spoke. "What if telling the truth hurts people?" Naomi felt her heart break. No 8-year-old should carry that burden. "Sometimes the truth hurts at first," she answered carefully. "But lies hurt for much longer." Lily looked down at her hands. Then she whispered something Naomi had never heard before. "I saw somebody make Grandma cry." Naomi remained completely still. She knew pushing too hard would only make Lily retreat again. "Did Grandma know you were there?" Lily nodded. "She told me not to come out." The words sent a chill through Naomi. Another memory. Another piece of the puzzle. Yet before Lily could say more, Ethan's phone rang. It was Harold. His voice sounded unusually tense. "Sir, I think you need to come home immediately." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "What happened?" Harold paused. "Someone entered your late wife's private study." Ethan froze. That room had remained untouched for years. Almost nobody had access to it. Was anything taken? Harold's answer came slowly. "I do not know yet. But whoever entered knew exactly where to look." Within the hour, Ethan stood inside the study staring at drawers that had been opened and files that had been disturbed. Nothing appeared stolen. Nothing appeared damaged. Yet the room felt violated. Then Naomi noticed something strange. One shelf contained dozens of books. Every item was covered in dust except for a single leather-bound journal. Someone had handled it recently. Ethan reached for the journal. The moment he opened it, a folded photograph slipped onto the floor. He picked it up and felt his blood run cold. The image showed Rachel standing beside a person Ethan immediately recognized. And the date printed on the photograph proved they had known each other years before anyone claimed they first met. The question was no longer whether secrets existed. The question was why Rachel had hidden this one from everyone. The photograph shattered whatever certainty Ethan still had left. He sat alone in Rachel's study long after everyone else had gone to bed, staring at the image under the soft glow of a desk lamp. The person standing beside his late wife was not a stranger. It was Vanessa. Younger. Different hairstyle. Different clothes. But unmistakably Vanessa. The date printed at the bottom was nearly 10 years old. Several years before Ethan had supposedly introduced them for the first time. The discovery made no sense. Every conversation, every memory, every explanation Vanessa had ever given him suddenly felt unstable. Yet the deeper wound was not the photograph itself. It was the realization that Rachel had deliberately preserved it. She had wanted someone to find it. The next morning, Ethan confronted Vanessa. Not with accusations. Not with anger. Just questions. Simple questions. Questions that should have had simple answers. Instead, Vanessa became defensive almost immediately. She claimed she barely remembered the encounter. She insisted it had been a coincidence. A charity event. A brief meeting. Nothing important. But Ethan noticed something he had never seen before. Fear. For the first time since he met her, Vanessa seemed genuinely afraid. When the conversation ended, neither of them felt reassured. Meanwhile, another crisis was unfolding. Eleanor's condition suddenly worsened. Not dramatically, not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to frighten everyone who loved her. The small improvements they had celebrated only days earlier seemed to disappear overnight. Dr. Carter ordered additional testing. Nurses increased their monitoring. The atmosphere around her room changed. Hope retreated. Anxiety returned. Ethan felt himself slipping back into old habits. He stopped sleeping. He missed meals. He buried himself in documents, timelines, records, and theories. The more he searched for answers, the less present he became. Lily noticed immediately. Children always did. One evening, she sat alone on the staircase while Ethan paced through the study speaking with lawyers and investigators. Naomi found her there hugging her bear. "Daddy is disappearing again," Lily whispered. Naomi sat beside her. The words hurt because they were true. Ethan was physically present but emotionally miles away. Consumed by fear. Consumed by guilt. Consumed by the possibility that he had failed the people who needed him most. Naomi wanted to comfort the child, but before she could respond, Lily began crying. Not quietly. Not the silent tears she had hidden for months. Real tears. Deep tears. The kind that come when a child can no longer carry the weight alone. "Everybody keeps leaving," she sobbed. Naomi immediately wrapped her arms around her. The sentence pierced straight through her heart. Because Lily was not only talking about Rachel. She was talking about her grandmother. About Ethan. About everyone she feared losing. Upstairs, Ethan heard the crying and froze. For several seconds, he simply stood there listening. Then something inside him broke. He walked downstairs, sat beside his daughter, and held her while she cried. No phone. No meetings. No distractions. Just a father and a little girl carrying too much pain. For a brief moment, healing seemed possible again. Then the crisis deepened. The following morning, Harold arrived at the hospital carrying devastating news. The safe deposit box had been emptied. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. The bank confirmed that its contents were removed less than 48 hours earlier. Security records existed, but access had been legally authorized. The person responsible had used valid identification and proper credentials. Ethan immediately demanded to know who. The bank refused to release information without a court order. Every lead they had followed suddenly seemed to vanish. Eleanor was weakening. Lily was frightened. Naomi was trying desperately to hold everyone together. And the one piece of evidence that might have explained everything was now gone. That night, Ethan sat beside his mother's bed. The room was dark except for a small lamp near the window. Eleanor slowly opened her eyes and reached for his hand. Her voice was barely audible. "You are looking in the wrong place." Ethan leaned closer. "What do you mean?" Her eyes filled with sadness. Then she whispered one final sentence before drifting back to sleep. "The secret was never inside the box." Ethan sat frozen. Because if the answer was not hidden in the place everyone had been searching, then where had Rachel and Eleanor been pointing him all along? After Eleanor whispered that the secret had never been inside the box, Ethan stopped searching for objects and started searching for meaning. For days, he had chased documents, keys, signatures, photographs, and records. Yet every path seemed to circle back to the same painful truth. The people who knew the answer best were Rachel and Eleanor, and he had spent years being too busy to truly listen to either of them. That realization haunted him. It followed him through the hospital corridors, through board meetings he could barely focus on, and through sleepless nights staring at family photographs. The breakthrough arrived from the person nobody expected, Lily. It happened on a quiet afternoon while Naomi helped her organize old art supplies in the sunroom. Hidden beneath a stack of construction paper was a small envelope Naomi had never seen before. The handwriting on the front belonged to Rachel. It simply read, "For Lily." Naomi's hands immediately trembled. Rachel had died years earlier. How had this remained hidden? When Ethan arrived home, Naomi showed him the envelope. For several seconds he could not move. Then, with Lily sitting beside him, he carefully opened it. Inside was a short letter written in Rachel's familiar handwriting. But it was not a farewell letter. It was not a confession. It was something far more unexpected. Rachel wrote about fear. Not fear of death, fear of being forgotten. Fear that the people she loved would become strangers to one another after she was gone. She wrote that families rarely fall apart because of one terrible event. They fall apart because people stop seeing each other, stop listening, stop asking questions. Ethan felt every word strike his heart, because that was exactly what had happened. Then came the sentence that changed everything. If Lily ever begins drawing doors again, it means she remembers something important. Ethan looked up immediately. Naomi stared at him. Lily slowly lowered her eyes. The drawings, the doors, the symbols. Rachel had known about them years before they started appearing again. Suddenly, they were no longer random. They were messages, memories. The letter continued. Rachel explained that Lily often processed emotions through images rather than words. When something frightened her deeply, she drew it before she could explain it. Ethan felt sick. All this time, his daughter had been trying to communicate, and all this time, he had dismissed what she was saying. For the first time, he confronted a painful truth about himself. He had not ignored Lily because he did not love her. He ignored her because he believed problems could always be solved logically. But grief was not logical. Fear was not logical. Children were not logical. They needed presence more than solutions. That evening, Ethan sat with Lily for hours. No interruptions. No phones. No meetings. He simply asked questions and listened. Slowly, carefully, she began sharing pieces of memories she had hidden for months. Not complete stories. Fragments. Images. Feelings. Then she said something that made Ethan's heart stop. Grandma was not scared for herself. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Lily looked down at the old letter. She was scared for somebody else. Naomi and Ethan exchanged a glance. That single sentence changed the entire picture. They had assumed Eleanor was protecting herself, protecting her assets, protecting her medical decisions. But what if they were wrong? What if the secret Rachel and Eleanor had been guarding all these years was never about Eleanor at all? Later that night, Naomi returned to the hospital and found something she had overlooked before. Hidden inside the frame of the photograph from the church was a second note folded so tightly it was almost invisible. The paper contained only one sentence written by Eleanor years earlier. Rachel was right. She must never find out until she is old enough. Naomi stared at the words in disbelief. She, not he, not they, she. Suddenly, every clue pointed in a different direction. The promise, the hidden messages, the fear, the drawings. The secret did not appear to center around Ethan. It did not appear to center around Eleanor. Somehow, after all these years, the mystery had always been connected to Lily. But what truth about the little girl had Rachel and Eleanor been protecting for nearly a decade? The discovery changed the direction of everything. For weeks, Ethan had believed he was uncovering a conspiracy aimed at his mother. Now he faced a far more unsettling possibility. Rachel and Eleanor had spent years protecting a secret connected to Lily. Not money, not inheritance, not control of the family fortune. Lily. The realization forced Ethan to reconsider every clue from the beginning. The drawings, the hidden messages, the fear in Eleanor's eyes, the urgency in Rachel's letters. None of it fit the story he had been telling himself. And for the first time, he admitted something painful. He had spent years assuming he understood his own family. The truth was, he barely knew what they had been carrying. The following morning, Naomi and Ethan returned to the church shown in the old photograph. It was a small stone building nearly an hour from the city. Quiet, modest, almost forgotten. Eleanor and Rachel had visited it frequently years earlier, yet Ethan had never been there. Another detail he had somehow missed. Inside, an elderly pastor welcomed them warmly. The moment he heard Eleanor's name, his expression softened. I wondered if this day would come, he said. Those words immediately caught Ethan's attention. The pastor explained that Rachel and Eleanor had asked him to keep certain records private until the family was ready. He disappeared into a back office and returned carrying a weathered envelope. Unlike the other letters they had found, this one was addressed directly to Ethan. The date on the front was only weeks before Rachel's death. Ethan opened it carefully. As he read, his eyes filled with tears. Rachel was not warning him about danger. She was pleading with him. She wrote that success had become a wall between him and the people who loved him. She wrote that Lily needed more than financial security. She needed presence. She needed connection. She needed a father who could see her. The words felt like a mirror reflecting every mistake he had spent years avoiding. Then came the revelation that stunned him. Rachel explained that Lily had witnessed something shortly before her death. Not a crime, not a scandal, something deeply personal, something so confusing for a child that Eleanor and Rachel decided to protect her until she was old enough to understand. Ethan lowered the letter. His hands trembled. The pastor quietly handed him another item. A small journal belonging to Rachel. Inside were entries describing conversations with Lily, drawings, questions, fears, and one recurring topic: abandonment. Ethan suddenly understood why Lily's grief had become so complicated. She was not only mourning her mother. She had spent years terrified that everyone she loved would eventually leave her too. Every strange behavior suddenly made sense. Every nightmare, every drawing, every silence. Back at the hospital, Eleanor finally regained enough strength for a longer conversation. Naomi sat beside her while Ethan listened. Slowly, Eleanor confirmed what Rachel had feared. Lily had overheard a conversation years ago that she was never supposed to hear. A conversation involving Rachel and another person. The misunderstanding had shaped the child's fears ever since. Yet before Eleanor could explain further, another twist arrived. Dr. Carter entered with information from hospital administration. Security records had finally been reviewed. The mysterious access request connected to the emptied safe deposit box had been traced. Ethan expected a stranger, a lawyer, an unknown accomplice. Instead, the name on the report left everyone speechless. Vanessa Clark. The room fell silent. For the first time, suspicion became certainty. Vanessa had been searching for the same secret they were trying to uncover. Eleanor slowly closed her eyes. Naomi squeezed Lily's shoulder. Ethan stared at the report, feeling years of trust collapse in an instant. Then Eleanor looked directly at him and whispered words that would change everything. "It is time to tell Lily the truth." And for the first time since this nightmare began, Ethan realized that the final answer had been sitting beside him all along. The truth was far simpler than anyone expected. And somehow, that made it even more heartbreaking. Later that evening, Ethan sat beside Lily in Eleanor's hospital room while Naomi quietly remained nearby. The room felt different now, not because the mystery was solved, but because nobody was running from it anymore. Eleanor reached for Lily's hand and held it gently. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Eleanor finally explained what Rachel had spent years trying to protect. The conversation Lily overheard as a child happened only weeks before Rachel died. Rachel and Eleanor had been discussing guardianship plans in case something unexpected happened. They talked about who would care for Lily, who would raise her, who would protect her if Rachel was no longer there. Lily had heard only fragments. A child hidden outside a doorway. A child hearing adults discuss life after her mother's death. She misunderstood everything. In her young mind, the conversation became proof that people leave. People disappear. People get taken away. The fear rooted itself so deeply that even years later it shaped the way she saw the world. Every illness, every goodbye, every closed door, every absence, it all connected back to that moment. Tears filled Ethan's eyes as he listened. His daughter had carried that fear alone for years. Not because nobody loved her, because nobody realized how frightened she had been. Then Eleanor revealed the final piece. The secret Rachel and Eleanor protected was never about money or inheritance. It was a collection of letters. Letters Rachel wrote for Lily to read as she grew older. Letters filled with encouragement, memories, life lessons, and reminders that she would always be loved. The safe deposit box had never been the true hiding place because Eleanor moved the letters months earlier after becoming concerned someone was searching for them. The person looking was Vanessa. Hospital investigators and attorneys eventually confirmed what Ethan had begun to suspect. Vanessa had learned fragments about the letters and believed they contained information connected to the Whitmore estate. She spent months chasing a financial secret that never existed. Her actions revealed a painful truth about her intentions, and Ethan ended the relationship. Not with anger, not with revenge, simply with clarity. For the first time, he saw her exactly as she was. More importantly, he finally saw the people he had overlooked. The days that followed brought quiet changes. Eleanor continued improving. Dr. Carter called it remarkable progress. Naomi called it peace. Ethan called it a second chance. The biggest transformation happened at home. The mansion no longer felt like a museum filled with grief. Ethan began leaving work early. Family dinners returned. Phones stayed off during conversations. On Saturday mornings, he sat beside Lily while she drew. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they simply sat together. Both mattered. One afternoon, Lily handed him a new picture. Ethan immediately noticed something different. There were no locked doors, no lonely hallways, no frightened faces, just a family gathered beneath a bright sky. This time, there were 5 figures. Ethan, Lily, Eleanor, Naomi, and Rachel, drawn above them with a smile. She is still part of the family, Lily explained. Ethan could not speak for several seconds. Then he pulled his daughter into his arms. Across the room, Naomi quietly wiped away tears. Months earlier, she had arrived as an employee. Somewhere along the journey, she became something far more important. She became the person who helped a broken family find its way back to one another. A few weeks later, during a small gathering in the garden, Ethan stood before family and friends and publicly thanked Naomi. Not for her work, not for her professionalism, for her heart, for her courage, for staying when leaving would have been easier. Eleanor smiled. Lily ran across the grass laughing. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt something he could not buy, negotiate, or build. Peace. Because money had never been the thing his family needed most. What saved them was presence. What healed them was kindness. And what changed their lives forever was the simple decision to truly see one another before it was too late.